Alright everyone, we start off today with a little bit of poll analysis for the midterms. Three different races, two of which I think are kind of political bellwethers, one of which is just off the chains hilarious because it happens to involve Beto O'Rourke thinking that he can knock off a popular multi-term incumbent. When the election, the tailwind is with the Republicans right now. The Democrats keep attacking parents and trying to undermine the educational system and spend trillions in funny money and keep things locked down intermittently. So I can't imagine that the inflation helps or the border crisis. By the way, the title allowing deportation now being torn apart by the Biden administration. So Abbott getting a boost by saying it's partially just hyperbole. Oh, we're going to take some of these illegals and bust them to D.C. and Delaware. It's fine, but it's a voluntary program, and that's not being widely covered by the legacy media. Another lie by omission moment. By the way, if I sound a little bit hoarse, this is the sixth take of this video. The cat's having a difficult morning. Also, there's some sort of pollen in the air. I don't know exactly what's blooming right now, because I'm not as familiar with European species as American ones. Whatever it is, I'm sure that I'm at least mildly allergic to it, because I'm a little bit throaty today. And just think, I have to do a live stream later. And probably two new tech exclusives, considering there's an avalanche of highly relevant news. Soon we'll get inflation numbers too, so it's going to be a fun day for me. Here's some analysis. I'm not going to bother opening RCP, although you can go there. First, we'll look at Texas. That's where Beto O'Rourke steamrolled the other Democratic challengers because they had no name recognition in order to be Greg Abbott's punching bag, Greg Abbott running for re-election. I'm saying there's a 99% chance that Abbott is re-elected. He's got a weak opponent. He's got a strong state economy. A very unpopular Democratic president is dragging everyone down ballot. And then the border crisis, again, is not helping the Democrats' numbers. It was funny, though. The reason I'm throwing this in with the analysis here is specifically because Beto O'Rourke is now cope posting as well. The other day on Twitter, he had a thing there, and he's like, oh, there's a statistical tie in the Texas gubernatorial election. It was some locally concocted poll that still showed Beto, by the way, a point behind Greg Abbott. Now, that would be close. It would be within statistical tie range. The problem is that it's apparently an unreliable enough poll. It's not even in the aggregate. This is some local poll. I don't even know the sampling methodology. I don't think he even linked it out. So it means nothing. If you look at the actual aggregated polling, Beto O'Rourke is between 7 and 12 points behind thereabouts. There's like a 9-point gap in the aggregate. I can't imagine under any circumstances, because Texas doesn't have a fortified election either, that Beto can pull it off. Again, unless there's a massive sea change between now and the midterms. Now, there's still many months for that to happen, but it's getting less and less likely, and certainly some of the indicators, the economy and the border will not get better. The problem is those are two major issues in Texas. So Beto's probably toast. Then, we have to talk about Raphael Warnock and Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams, of course, is running there yet again. She lost before. I look at the aggregate and I say, okay, before, and that's the case with Warnock too. Very close races. He's in Georgia, state that has, at least until recently, I think, become more blue. Had been reliably red, then leaned red, and as of the last election, looks like it's basically the sum and substance of a swing state. Leaned slightly blue in the results, honk honk, totally legit and everything. Warnock and Abrams are both about 4 to 5 points behind in the aggregate, 3 to 5 roughly. That would be outside of the statistical tie territory, if only narrowly. The thing is, if you presume a state has moved slightly left, and it leans slightly left, by like a half a point or something, but the candidate who has the name recognition, has, in Warnock's case, the technical incumbency, had run a special election before, and they're behind by that margin, it shows a shift potentially in the other direction. I consider these bellwether races. The confusion over the eventual results, it wouldn't be there if Georgia had a defortified election system. If their election system had followed in the footsteps of half a dozen other states in the wake of the 2020 best election, most fair and everything ever, then I would say there's like an 80% chance they lose, which means another Dem Senate seat bites the dust. They're not really looking at anything where they can make any easy pickups, and most of those are in defortified states. So I would be able to not call them, but going towards the midterms, the probability would narrow more and more as the midterms approach. But we can't do that because we have to understand that we've got what appears to be the groundwork being laid to make another COVID-based election change towards the midterms. Well, it's unsafe for people to go outside of their homes. We have to have more mail-in ballot access and stuff. In a state where the Dems control enough to cause that to happen, we therefore can't give you any expectation. It's impossible for me to give a metric, a true expectation of what that race will entail as far as the results go. Texas is more ironclad. I would also like to address the concept of election defortification and fairness and so forth. The vast majority of states either were never fortified or have defortified and enacted legislation and action to prevent that from happening. Although it is legally embattled in several of those states, like in Florida, the expectation is that generally that will carry, it will be found constitutional. And so looking forward into 2024, things potentially are quite rosy because at the federal level, you're going to have the Republicans will retake the House. If they don't, it would be the most legendary loss ever. There aren't enough House seats in places where there could be honking going on, I think, to protect the Democratic Party. That doesn't mean that neocons don't replace some of them, but the partisan swing will be large enough that the populist libertarian side of the party has an inordinate proportion of control. They'll probably try to get their people into positions of power, and the same could happen in the Senate. Of course, Mitch McConnell is the most weebly, wobbly, turtle-looking neocon you can imagine. He was occasionally a useful idiot and usually an idiot when Trump was in office. Very good at strategy. He's very good at using procedure within the Senate to get his way. But when his way is half-assed neocon land, it's like, who cares? So we'll see what happens going forward. But I'm thinking that Warnock and Abrams are being dragged mainly by the weak, pathetic Biden administration. Because in Georgia, of course, you're not going to have the border crisis they have in Texas affecting things at least as much. You have that more blue population that's more resistant to economic problems. I mean, they suffer just as much from it, but they're more resistant to actually blaming the right parties for their problems. They're used to blaming, I don't know, suburbanites or flyover state people, farmers and shit for their particular economic problems caused, in most cases in Georgia, by inner city governments as opposed to the state at large. Of course, when you have onerous taxes and regulations and high crime, and crime would be a major issue, I think, there as well. It'd be probably number 2. It could be a little bit of a problem. I think that Beto loses. I think that at least either Warnock or Abrams probably loses, regardless of what happens with the, fortification of various elections. And it remains to be seen whether that will even play a role. Of course, there are only so many votes in Atlanta that you can count on. I expect turnout there would be lower than in Texas. Greg Abbott seems to have a reasonable popularity. That is that there's enthusiasm there, and not just among Republicans. Part of it is, imagine that Texas elects Beto O'Rourke. Well, all of a sudden the state government might be amenable to destroying the state economy with a lockdown. All of a sudden, maybe he does come for the guns. That's going to be a big thing too, his past statements that he now has gone back on. But people still remember it. This is no longer the 1990s where the legacy media doesn't report on it so the average person wouldn't know about it. This is no longer the era before mass human communication. Everyone knows Beto's real position on guns and on CRT and things like that, by the way, that he, again, has backed off of. It's almost like he's a chameleon. He really is the cult of personality dude. He'll be everything that you want him to be. If 51% of the voters say, hey, I think that we should ban using the color yellow on clothing, Beto O'Rourke could probably come out at least halfway in favor of it. Well, I'm not sure about all yellow, but there are certain shades that really piss me off. We'll talk about it after you elect me. That'd probably be his line. He's crazy. He's also cringy. That's why he'll lose. Again, Beto, Warnock, some of the other close races around the country, it's harder to say. It depends on how honk honk the election in the states will be, ultimately. As we get closer to the midterms, I'll try to look at the specific legislation and I'll figure that into my final predictions for some of the more important races. I'll have to look more deeply into it, but I know that Georgia's not fully defortified, unfortunately. That's about all. Peace out.